Hi there. You were asking if you can use a Netcode with visual scripting for multiplayer, and I've been testing around, and here are the results and the way you can use it. I have two of the games running here, so one in Unity and the other one in a window view. So let's click host for this one and select client for this one, and now you can see that there are two tanks spawned, and now I can play with one of them with my host and then control the other one with my client. You can also spawn bullets and destroy your enemy like that. So this is a game that I did a multiplayer tutorial before, but in that tutorial I used Photon. So if you're interested in the assets and the setup of the scene, I did put it on my Discord under resources. You can find the game with just a single player and also with this multiplayer version. So let me walk you through the setup that you'll have to go for getting it working with Netcode. The first thing, you need to make sure that we install Package Manager, and for the Netcode you'll need two packages: the multiplayer tools and also the Netcode for game objects. So make sure you have those installed, and I think they're available in Unity 2022 and 2021. So if you have those Unity versions, you'll be able to install Netcode for game objects and also the multiplayer tools. Now the setup that I have here is I have a manager which has the network manager, and the player prefab is tank, and the network prefab is a bullet because we need to spawn bullets. That's the configurations here, and I am using a Unity transport. Now for connecting the host or the client, I have two buttons, and we can take a look at one of them real quick. So if I open this graph, you can see that I'm using the network manager to start the client, and I'm starting on the singleton. So that's how you can get the network manager from anywhere. That is pretty simple. So that's a client, and the host button is the same. Now to get those nodes, you will have to go to the project settings and add those inside of the type options. But before you try to find them in the type options, you'll need to add Unity Netcode components and a runtime to be able to find those. So just search for Netcode, and then I think you just need the runtime, but just to be safe, I actually added both of those. And now under type options, I added two things: the network manager and network objects. That's the only two types that I used in this project. But if you want to use any other types from the Netcode library, you can add them here by searching. After you add, be sure to run regenerate nodes, and that's going to create those nodes for you. So that is connecting the host and the client. And the next thing is creating your gameplay. Now for the gameplay, I have a player, which is a tank. And then in this game, I also have a bullet, which a tank can spawn. I reuse the control scripts that I've created for this game in the single player mode. So if we take a look here, you can see the changes that I made here. It used to be just running these two things on update, and I was using get input access horizontal and vertical in here. So I switched to using variables, and the variables are actually changed on a custom event. Now I'll get to the custom events in a bit, and I'll show why I'm using custom events here to set these variables. But the biggest thing that I had to do to get it to work is up here. I had to do all of this to get the input from the player, either it's a client or the host, to be sent to the server. Because by default, Netcode is server authoritative, meaning that all the movement of the players need to be happening on the server. So it's not trusting the client. You can switch it to allow client to change the position of the transform objects, but I decided to stay with the default settings. So right here, you can see that I have an update event, and I check if I own this network object, meaning if this is running on the client and the client owns this tank or the player, then this will get executed. Otherwise, if another client owns it, and none of this is going to run. So this is going to be running only on the client that owns this tank. So, and in here, you can see that I'm getting horizontal position and vertical position, and all of this in the middle. I'm just making a check and make sure that I only send the values of the horizontal and vertical if they actually change. So if you release a button, the horizontal will change or vertical change, then the values are going to be sent. The way that I send those values is by using the only script that I had to create, and I'm using the RPC calls here. We'll take a look at that script in a little bit, but all it does is enables you to send those RPC calls to the server or to the client. So in this case, I'm using a server RPC calls, passing the value h, and then also the value number, which is in this case an integer of my horizontal axis. It's going to be either -1, 0, or 1, because I decided to use integers here. Same exact thing for the vertical, except I'm setting v. Now the structure of the RPC calls, you can see that I have a value, v, and then a number. And this is where you can see the custom events that I get here. So you can see that there's the h for horizontal, and I'm getting that value from this custom event, and I'm setting it here. These are custom events that I can trigger from anywhere, but in this case, I'm actually triggering it from the script that I made for the RPC conversions. Again, we'll take a look at that in a little bit. Now the update, you can see that it's only running on the server. I check if this is a server. If it is a server, then I update the rotation logic and the velocity logic of the tank. So all the movement and all of that calculation is actually done on the server. And how the data is actually passed to the client is by using the network transform and network rigid body 2D. So my tank actually is using a rigid body, so I have added both of these. Now, since this tank is a network object, I also have the network object connected to it so that I can allow the network manager to be able to spawn these objects, destroy them when needed. Now, I said that I have this Netcode RPC for VS, for visual scripting, a script that I created. And if we take a look at what this script is, the only thing that it has here is this server RPC functions and the same exact client RPCs. So I don't know a way how to actually achieve this in visual scripting. So you kind of have to use this with C#. So it uses a network behavior, and then for the server RPCs, I created some functions that are possibly going to be used for communicating between the server and the client. You can go through all of these, but how they work is basically you can call this VS server RPC, and then the structure that I have here is string, and then if there is any value followed by it, there is the int, vector3, a float, and you can create other ones if you feel like you need to pass other values. But what it's doing is using the first variable, which is a string, to trigger a custom event on the visual scripting. So I'm triggering on this game object, and the string value is the name of the custom event. That's how the custom event triggers work. So if you want to pass an integer, which is what I'm doing for the controlling horizontal and verticals, then you can see that I have the value, which in my script, I passed the value of h for horizontal, and then the value for number. That's going to trigger a custom event of h and pass the number that I'm passing here, which is exactly what this is doing right here. So it's listening for custom event h and getting the value that was passed through. And the same exact thing that I have for the client RPCs, so same exact structure. Again, if you need other ones, you can use this structure to add more options, but these are just the basic ones that I've created. Now, what else we can look at? I also have the spawner of the bullet. So there's 2D shoot bullet. So let's take a look at the script. It's a little bit different here because on keyboard input space, I check if it's an owner, then all I do is use that RPC call to the server again to shoot that bullet. Now everything else is done on the server side. So you can see that I have this custom event, which is listening for that server RPC call. And this is only going to be run on the server. So the client is not going to run this code. And on the server, it's going to instantiate this bullet based on the location of the tank occurred moment and the rotation. Then it's going to do the activation, which I have. And then I also trigger the spawn of the network object, which is going to create that same game object on every client. This is what is going to trigger the spawn of this object on the client side. That's how the shooting works. Now the movement of the bullet, the destruction, and all of that is not actually being controlled by the server. Since the rotation and the position of the bullet is spawned correctly, I'm actually just allowing the bullet to be spawned on the client side and fly in the direction that it's supposed to, and does not actually sync up the position of the bullet between the client and the server. If you want, you can actually sync that as well, but I decided that it's not going to actually affect anything in my case, so I just left it as is. Now, same thing with the explosion, everything, it just plays on the local machine. So the last thing that I have here is also a health. So each tank has a health, and we can take a look inside here. Now the health and damage is done on the server side, and you can see that I have it right here. So I check if it's a server, then I execute all of these calculations. So once there is a damage, so the bullet actually can trigger the damage on the client side as well, but this script is going to ignore any damage events that are called on the client side. It's going to only calculate the health on the server side. And then after all the health calculation happens, then it triggers the VS client RPC. And this client RPC sends the health value to this custom event on every client and updates the health that is displayed. Now in here on the server side, you can see that I have the game object destroy if the tank goes below certain health. And once something is destroyed on the server side, it gets destroyed on the client side as well. So you could trigger the network object despawn to destroy it on the server and the client. Now, this is just a quick run through the setup that I have here of the testing that I did with visual scripting and Netcode. If you have any more questions or you want to see in more details about this topic, be sure to mention that in the comments and I'll see what I can do. Like always, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.